Hello, welcome to Breaking It All Down. I'm Count Zero. It's been a couple of months since my last film review. I've been doing a bunch of book reviews, as you may have noticed. So I'd say now's a good time for the next film review. This time, I'm going to take a look at a World War II Ensemble film from 1966 titled Is Paris Burning? However, before I get into the movie itself, I feel it's a good time to get into some splaining. Hollywood has been making movies about World War II pretty much since, well, the U.S. got involved in the war. These movies have generally been of two bents. The first is the purely fictionalized film, whether through propaganda films during the war, or melodramas and exploitation films after the war. The second is films that were based on real events from the war, or from the careers of particular units or even individuals. During the war, these movies were, as with everything else, propaganda films, meant to make you want to buy war bonds or rile you up at the predations of the Germans, Italians, and Japanese and get you to enlist. However, they also tended to be less common during the war. The production process of a film is long enough, even within working within the studio system, to make it too difficult to capitalize on a particular event in time for the film to be topical. This is even more difficult when a studio also has to work with the limitations of war rationing, as well as having to work with whatever limited amounts of information has been made available from the War Department. The rare exceptions for this are films like Wake Island, which you're seeing a trailer for here, a film which probably entered production not long after the island fell to the Japanese, could be done for a relatively lower budget than a film about, say, Pearl Harbor or Corregidor, and could easily focus on a message of, remember the whatever, to motivate people to enlist to fight in the Pacific Theater or, again, buy war bonds. Now, after the war, as more information about battles became available, these types of films, the films about actual events, became more common. Most of these films worked with a big ensemble cast made either entirely of unknowns, who were less expensive to work with, or a group of unknowns with a smattering of big names. These films tended to focus on one particular battle, or a particular unit's history. For example, the film Battleground focused on the Siege of Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge, while the film Go for Broke focused on the 442nd Regiment and the Japanese-American soldiers in the unit. The recent film Red Tails kind of attempts to emulate the style of these later films with a varying degree of success, and they'll probably get around to reviewing this movie later. These films continue to be made into the 1960s and 70s, but tonally, the films shifted. On the one hand, the movie-watching public had become cynical about combat in the military based on the ongoing war in Vietnam. On the other hand, World War II was still looked upon fondly, I guess, in terms of as a war where things were simpler and the villains were somewhat clear-cut villains, but we over time learned that they were more sophisticated and more broad in their motivations. And also these films made mad bank at the box office, and so the studios wanted to keep making these. So as a consequence, actors with name recognition, which might be considered more, for lack of a better term, anti-establishment, would get involved in this, like, for example, Robert Redford being in the film A Bridge Too Far, in addition to having been involved in a whole bunch of other countercultural films, like, for example, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, among numerous others. This leads me to our film, which I would probably kind of describe very loosely as the French New Wave take on the World War II ensemble film. And normally this would lead to me inviting Kyle Colgren of Brows Held High in to do a crossover so we could talk about the French New Wave in this film. But, well, one, I checked my Internet Reviewer Clout score before I started recording this, and it's too low. I don't get the perk get to crossover with Channel Awesome Reviewer yet. I have to up my score a little bit higher to qualify. Also, he's working on the short film for his film degree, and he's really busy with that, and I'm actually kind of bummed I didn't get to the Kickstarter on that project in time, so I don't get the cool DVD with all the bonus feature extras. At least, I don't have that reserved. I'm totally going to get it when the DVD comes out, though. But Anyway, yeah, I want that movie to be really good. I don't want to take anything away from his attention from it. It's a speculative fiction film from a person who knows a lot about film, and I want that. I'm looking forward to seeing it and seeing just how great it can be. So I'm going to leave him out. I'll let him alone on this and stumble and fumble through this to the best of my ability. So, rather poorly. The film focuses on the liberation of Paris from the German occupation from the perspective of the resistance, but from a very different and less exploitation-y perspective than the game of The Saboteur, which I reviewed a while back. In particular, we see elements from the point of view of the resistance leaders, who are torn on tactics, in particular, whether to wait for the Allies to come to liberate Paris, or to try and push the Germans out on their own. We also see the events from the perspective of the German occupying forces, a common trait for films of this period, tying into the kind of cynical perspective that I mentioned earlier. In particular, we see them through the commander of the German occupation, General Dietrich von Cholitz, who was ordered to keep the situation under control in the city and to destroy the city if it's at risk of falling into Allied hands, something he really doesn't want to do. To the film's credit, while more recent films like U-571 or even semi-contemporary films like A Bridge Too Far would Americanize their cast by replacing characters from other countries with American or British actors, this film avoids that, with the majority of the resistance fighters, in fact all of the resistance fighters, being played by French actors, including members of the French New Wave, like, I'm going to mess up his name's pronunciation, Paul Belmondo, or Jean Belmondo, or something like that. Anyway, or Jean-Paul Belmondo, I forget precisely his first name, but that one guy. And this all works incredibly well. They're all acting in English as well, which to a certain degree makes sense. And performances are excellent, though there is one slight exception to the Anglo-washing rule, with the Swedish consul to Paris, Raoul Nordling, being played by American actor Orson Welles. So, I'm kind of torn about this. On the one hand, if you're introducing American filmgoers to a whole bunch of French and German actors who they really wouldn't have seen otherwise, aside from the guy playing the commander of the German garrison, von Cholitz, who you may remember as Albert Goldfinger, because a lot of these actors are people who most American audiences probably wouldn't have seen. This would have been a great opportunity to introduce American audiences to a Swedish actor who they also probably would not have seen to play Raoul Nordling. And so, on the one hand, I'm a little disappointed by the whitewashing there, or the Anglo-washing, if you will. Swedes are white. But on the other hand, it's Orson freaking Welles. He's a man who makes every movie classier by his mere presence in the frame. Without him having to say anything, just by being there, and by having him in such excellent scenes in this film. I'm not going to fault the movie for that. It's an excellent casting choice. There are other movies which I might get to later that I will fault for similar things, but I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. So again, aside from the eccentricity of having Orson Welles playing a Swede, the film is fine. As I mentioned, the cast of French actors here are some of the creme de la creme of French cinema, and they all speak English very fluently. Yes, they have accents. They're French. Of course they have accents, but they speak English perfectly. And yeah, it's great. The German actors also are great. And honestly, I don't have any objections with having characters who would be speaking German amongst themselves or French amongst themselves speaking English here, at least for the benefit of the American audience, because honestly, while subtitles, I don't mind subtitles on my movies. I mean, I previously reviewed samurai films, and I plan to review some, martial arts films of the non-badly dubbed variety in the future. I do also certainly prefer to be able to listen to dialogue and put my focus on the dialogue being said. And some people do have problems with following what's going on screen and reading subtitles. There's nothing wrong with that. And honestly, the film isn't hurt by it, so I can totally roll with it. The film's direction and cinematography are excellent. The use of black and white throughout the film, even though this movie was made when color was prominent, is great. And the script, which is by two excellent writers, Gore Vidal and Francis Ford Coppola, is fantastic. I mean, this is before Coppola did Patton, and well before he stepped into the director's chair with, well, everything we know him for. Godfather, Apocalypse Now, Tucker, A Man in His Dream, etc. So, really, if you're interested in World War II, or the French Resistance in particular, or you played the Saboteur and you want to learn more about what the French Resistance was really like, I definitely recommend checking out this film. So, thank you for watching. If you liked this review, please click the like button, or thumbs up button if you're watching on YouTube, or the love button if you're watching on Blip, and subscribe through either site. Next time, I hope to have another book review ready, and this will be one that'll finish off another fantasy novel series that I've been reviewing off and on since, well, I got started with this whole darn thing. And I think that'll probably be my 50th review, or just of reviews in general. So, I will see you then.